This is a demonstration of problem 14.7b, entries for life cycle of bonds. On June 1st, 2020, Royal Palm Company sold 6,000 of its 6% 20-year $1,000 face value bonds at 96. Interest payment dates are December 1st and June 1st, and the company uses the straight line method of bond discount amortization. On February 1st, 2021, Royal Palm took advantage of favorable prices of its stock to extinguish 4,000 of the bonds by issuing 500,000 shares of its $1 par value common stock. At this time, the accrued interest was paid in cash. The company stock was selling for $8.50 per share on February 1st, 2021. The instructions state to prepare the journal entries needed on the bonds of Royal Palm Company to record the following. And the first journal entry on June 1st, 2020 is to record the issuance of the bonds. The problem tells us that 6,000 $1,000 face value bonds were sold at 96. So when we multiply that, we get the proceeds for the bonds of $5,760,000. So that is the amount of cash that we would have received when the bonds were issued. The difference between the face value of the bonds, which is $6 million, and the cash that we would receive of $5,760,000 is the discount on bonds payable, which would be $240,000. Then we would credit bonds payable for the face amount of $6 million. The next entry is to record the December 1st, 2020 payment of the semi-annual interest. So first we need to determine what the discount amortization will be for each of the 6-month periods. We had a $240,000 discount. These are 20-year bonds that pay interest twice a year. So there are 40 interest payments. So if we divide $240,000 by 40, we get $6,000 of discount amortization per interest period. We also have to calculate the amount of interest that we actually pay to the bondholders. The interest we pay is always face times stated. These bonds pay interest semi-annually. So we multiply the face amount of the bond, $6 million, by half of the stated rate, 6%, which is 3%, and we get interest paid of $180,000 per 6-month period. So now we can record our journal entry. Our interest expense will be equal to $186,000, the amount of interest paid, plus the discount amortization on the bonds, which is $6,000, and we credit the discount account, and then we credit cash for the amount of cash that we pay, which is $180,000. Next, we are at the end of the year, December 31st, 2020, and we have to accrue the interest expense that has accrued on the bond since the last interest payment date. We paid interest the last time on December 1st, so it's only been 1 month. So you can take the 6 months of discount amortization, which we calculated above, which was $6,000, divide it by 6, and you get $1,000 per month of discount amortization. To determine the amount of interest that we need to credit to interest payable, we take the face amount of the bonds, $6 million, times the stated rate of 6%, multiply it by 1, and divide it by 12, and we get $30,000. So now we can record the accrual of the interest expense at December 31st. We would debit interest expense for $31,000. We would credit the discount on bonds payable for $1,000, and we would credit interest payable for $30,000. Next, the problem states that on February 1st, we extinguished 4,000 of the bonds. So when we extinguished the bonds, we also paid the accrued interest to the bondholders of the 4,000 bonds. So of the amount that we accrued at the end of 2020 on December 31st, a portion of that was for the bonds that we are extinguishing. If we're extinguishing $4 million of the $6 million of bonds, that is 2/3. So if we multiply 2/3 times the 30,000 that was accrued at the end of December, we would see that we need to pay $20,000 for that 1 month to the 4,000 bondholders. Next, we need to determine the amount of interest expense that has accrued on the 4,000 bonds for the 1 month from December 31st to February 1st. So we take the face amount of the bonds, $4 million, times 6%, times 1 divided by 12, and we get $20,000 of interest expense. We also have to determine how much of the discount on the bonds we need to amortize for the 4,000 bonds for 1 month. So we can take the $4 million face value times 96, and we could determine that the discount on the $4 million of bonds would have been $160,000. If we multiply that by 1 and divide it by 240, we can determine that on the 4,000 bonds, $667 per month would be amortized. We could also determine that by taking the $1,000 a month for all the bonds and multiplying that by 2/3. So now we're ready to make the entry to record the payment of the accrued interest on the 4,000 bonds that we are going to be extinguishing. We would debit interest payable for $20,000, and we would debit interest expense for $20,667. We would credit discount on bonds payable for $667, and we would credit cash for $40,000. The next thing that we will have to determine is whether we have a gain or a loss on the extinguishment of the bonds. The first thing that you have to determine is what is the carrying value of the bonds that are being extinguished. So we know that we are going to be extinguishing 4,000 bonds, or $4 million of the bonds payable. We know that our discount was $160,000. These bonds have been outstanding for 8 months. We need to determine the amount of the discount on the bonds that has not been amortized. So these bonds would have been outstanding for 240 months total. They have had 8 months of amortization. So if we multiply 160,000 times 232 divided by 240, we will get $154,667 of discount that has not been amortized. So to determine the carrying amount of the bonds, we take the face amount of the bonds, which is $4 million. We subtract the unamortized discount, $154,667, and that gives us a carrying amount for the bonds of $3,845,333. So at this point in time, that is the carrying amount of the bonds. We know that we are going to be exchanging stock, 500,000 shares, that have a market value of $8.50. So if we multiply 500,000 times $8.50, we get $4,250,000. So we have a loss on the redemption of the bonds because we are giving Our bondholders' stock that is worth $4,250,000 in exchange for bonds that have a carrying value of $3,845,333. So the loss on the redemption of the bonds is $404,667. Now we can record the entry for the extinguishment of the bonds. First, we will debit bonds payable for the face amount of the bonds, which is $4 million. Then we will debit the loss on the redemption of the bonds, which is $404,667. Next, we will credit the remaining discount or unamortized discount on the bonds payable, which is $154,667. Next, we will credit common stock for the par value of the 500,000 shares. The par value was $1, so we would credit common stock for $500,000. Last, we will credit additional paid-in capital for the remaining amount of the value of the shares of stock, which is $7.50. $8.50 of market value minus $1 par value gives us $7.50 times 500,000 shares, or $3,750,000. And that is the conclusion of the demonstration for problem 14, 7b.